It was nearly 11 on a cold Friday night when a black Bentley Continental GT rolled silently into the gravel lot of a small repair shop outside Denver. The woman behind the wheel stepped out wearing a navy blazer, placed the key on the counter, and said only one sentence: "Fix it. I'll be back." Then she disappeared into another waiting car without leaving her name, a phone number, or even a repair order. Most mechanics would have shrugged and started checking the engine. Mason Cole wasn't most mechanics. Within minutes, he noticed a thin trail of fresh brake fluid beneath the rear axle. It wasn't an ordinary leak. Someone had deliberately weakened the brake line with surgical precision, creating a failure that wouldn't happen until the car reached highway speed. Whoever had done it wasn't trying to damage an expensive luxury car. They were trying to kill the woman who owned it. But the deeper Mason searched, the more disturbing the mystery became. Hidden inside the Bentley was a sealed envelope, a USB drive, and a name from a past he thought he had left behind forever. Before sunrise, he realized he wasn't repairing a vehicle anymore. He had just stepped into a conspiracy worth billions of dollars. Mason Cole was 38 years old and preferred it when people didn't ask questions. His repair shop sat at the end of a quiet county road outside Denver, tucked between a shuttered diner and a tire warehouse that had seen better days. From the outside, Cole's Auto looked like the kind of place most luxury car owners would never notice. Inside, however, everything reflected a different story. Every wrench hung in perfect order. Every diagnostic tool rested exactly where it belonged. The concrete floor was spotless enough to reflect the fluorescent lights overhead. Machines made sense to Mason. People rarely did. He walked slowly around the black Bentley Continental GT, studying it without touching anything. The paintwork was flawless. The tires showed almost no wear. Whoever owned the vehicle had maintained it with exceptional care. Yet one detail refused to leave his mind: the thin crescent of hydraulic brake fluid beneath the rear axle. It was too clean, too deliberate. He crouched beneath the car and aimed his flashlight along the brake assembly. Within seconds, his expression hardened. The brake line hadn't failed naturally. Someone had carefully scored its surface with an extremely fine carbide tool, weakening the metal just enough that it would survive city driving before bursting under sustained pressure at highway speed. The driver would press the brake pedal, feel it sink uselessly to the floor, and lose control before realizing anything had happened. This wasn't mechanical failure. It was attempted murder. Instead of replacing the damaged line immediately, Mason began documenting everything exactly as he had been trained years before. Every photograph came from multiple angles. Every measurement was recorded with quiet precision. Nothing was moved before it was documented. Old habits never disappeared. They simply waited for the day they became necessary again. For the next 3 hours, he inspected every system on the Bentley. The engine was flawless. The transmission showed no abnormal wear. The electronics were untouched. Whoever sabotaged the vehicle had wanted investigators to believe the accident was nothing more than an unexpected brake failure. Almost perfect. Almost. Near midnight, Mason removed the trim panel inside the trunk and paused. Hidden behind the factory lining was a small compartment that didn't belong there. Inside rested a sealed envelope beside a USB flash drive. Across the front of the envelope, written in neat handwriting, were only 4 words: "If I don't return." Beneath those words appeared a single name: Logan Burke. Mason stared at the envelope in complete silence. He hadn't spoken that name in 4 years. Most people would have opened the envelope immediately. He didn't. Instead, he carefully photographed both items where they lay, slipped them into separate evidence bags, noted the exact time they were recovered, and placed them inside his desk drawer without breaking the seal. Whoever had left them inside the Bentley wasn't asking for help. They were preparing for the possibility that they would never come back. As Mason locked the shop for the night, one question refused to leave his mind. Who was the woman willing to disappear into the darkness? And why had someone gone to such extraordinary lengths to ensure she never returned alive? Earlier that same Friday, 40 floors above downtown Denver, Giselle Hartman sat at the head of a polished conference table listening to a financial presentation she already knew was false. Hartman Automotive Group was worth more than $2 billion. Her late father had spent 3 decades building the company into one of the largest independent automotive corporations in the Mountain West. When he passed away 18 months earlier, many board members quietly assumed the young woman who inherited the company would eventually fail. Instead, Giselle had spent the last year proving them wrong. She modernized operations, increased profits, and earned the respect of employees across the company. But while she focused on growing the business, someone else had been quietly taking control behind the scenes. Adrienne Voss, the company's chief financial officer, had worked beside her father for years and was widely respected by the board. Calm, intelligent, and always impeccably dressed, Adrian rarely raised his voice. He never needed to. His influence spread through quiet conversations, carefully timed meetings, and decisions that appeared reasonable until someone looked closely. Over the previous 4 months, Giselle noticed that financial approvals no longer reached her directly. Sensitive reports disappeared before arriving at her office. Board members began discussing major decisions without informing her first. Every week, another piece of authority slipped quietly from her hands. Someone was isolating the company's CEO. Rather than confront Adrian without evidence, Giselle started documenting everything herself. Late at night, long after the executive floor had emptied, she reviewed emails, accounting records, and approval histories using a temporary administrative account created under an inactive contractor's credentials. She copied only the files she believed might later prove what was happening inside the company. What she discovered was far worse than an internal power struggle. Millions of dollars had been transferred through unfamiliar holding companies. Contracts carried digital signatures she had never authorized. Entire financial transactions appeared to exist solely to move company assets beyond the board's attention. Someone wasn't simply stealing money. Someone was preparing to steal the entire company. 2 weeks earlier, realizing the conspiracy had become dangerous, Giselle copied the most important records onto a USB drive. She sealed them inside an envelope together with a handwritten name she had uncovered while researching old federal investigation files. Mason Cole. Years before opening a small repair shop, he had served as a senior forensic engineer investigating suspicious vehicle accidents. One unfinished investigation had ended his government career, but his reputation for uncovering mechanical sabotage had never disappeared. Giselle hoped she would never need to find him. Then everything changed on the highway. Driving back from a factory inspection that afternoon, she felt the brake pedal sink just slightly farther than normal. Most drivers would never have noticed such a tiny difference. She did. Her father had taught her that every vehicle warns its driver before something fails. Without taking any chances, she exited the highway, searched for the nearest independent repair shop, and found Cole's auto only a few miles away. She left the Bentley, the envelope, and the USB behind. As her second car disappeared into the Denver night, Giselle understood one terrifying truth. If someone had already sabotaged her brakes, they were no longer trying to remove her from the company. They were trying to erase her completely. At exactly 7:15 the next morning, Mason picked up his personal phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 4 years. When the line connected, he spoke only 4 words. "I have something yours." A long silence followed. Then the voice on the other end finally answered. "Where are you?" 40 minutes later, Logan Burke pulled into Cole's auto driving an aging gray pickup truck with a cracked side mirror. Time had added a few lines to his face, but little else had changed. He still carried himself with the quiet awareness of a man who never entered a room without noticing every exit first. The 2 men shook hands without ceremony. Neither wasted time asking how life had been. Inside the garage, Mason spread several photographs across the workbench. Logan studied each image carefully before speaking. "That brake line didn't fail. It was never supposed to," Mason replied. He explained how the line had been deliberately scored with a precision carbide tool. The damage was nearly invisible, yet calculated to survive normal driving before rupturing at highway speed. To anyone investigating the crash afterward, It would appear to be nothing more than an unfortunate mechanical failure. Logan slowly nodded. Someone wanted the accident to look natural. Exactly. Mason then placed the sealed envelope and USB drive on the table. I found these hidden inside the trunk. Logan looked at the handwriting on the envelope and immediately recognized his own name. You didn't open them? Mason shook his head. They weren't left for me. The detective looked up with quiet respect. Many people would have broken the seal out of curiosity. Mason never considered it. Years spent working as a forensic engineer had taught him that evidence lost its value the moment emotion replaced procedure. Logan finally asked the question he had been holding back. She left these with you because she knew who you were, didn't she? For a moment, Mason remained silent. Then he walked to the corner of the workbench and turned over a picture frame that had faced the wall for years. It displayed an old federal credential. National Transportation Safety Board, Senior Forensic Engineer. Before opening his repair shop, Mason had spent 11 years investigating catastrophic vehicle accidents across the country. His specialty wasn't repairing damaged machines. It was proving when someone had intentionally damaged them. 4 years earlier, he had uncovered evidence linking several suspicious crashes to a powerful financial network. Just as the investigation began reaching influential people, the case was abruptly closed for procedural reasons. Mason resigned the same week. He never stopped believing the truth had simply been buried. Logan stared at the credential before looking back at his friend. So, this isn't the first time you've seen something like this? No. And you think whoever sabotaged this Bentley knows exactly what they're doing? I know they do. Before either man could say another word, a black sedan slowly rolled into the parking lot outside the garage. The driver's door opened. The same woman who had abandoned the Bentley the previous night stepped out, dressed far more casually than before. Beside her walked a younger woman whose alert eyes scanned every corner of the repair shop before they reached the entrance. Giselle Hartman had returned. Neither she nor Mason realized that the next conversation inside that quiet garage would begin exposing a conspiracy capable of bringing down a multi-billion-dollar corporation. By sunrise, the garage had become something far more than a repair shop. The Bentley still rested on the lift, but every photograph, measurement, and observation had now been organized into a formal forensic report. Mason had documented the damaged brake line from every possible angle, recorded precise measurements, and secured every piece of physical evidence under a verified chain of custody. Before dawn, a former colleague from the National Transportation Safety Board had remotely reviewed the findings and agreed to certify that the damage could not have occurred through normal wear. Meanwhile, Giselle sat at the opposite end of the workbench, rebuilding the financial timeline without relying on the files stored on the USB drive. Mason had explained why. The USB may tell the truth, he said, but if the evidence wasn't collected through a legally defensible process, a good attorney will challenge it before anyone hears the facts. Instead of depending on disputed records, Giselle searched through official emails, board meeting minutes, executive calendars, and documents that already existed inside the company's authorized systems. Every legitimate record strengthened the timeline she was building. Charlotte Reed worked beside her, writing down every unusual conversation, approval request, and executive meeting she could remember from the previous 2 months. Individually, the details seemed insignificant. Together, they formed a disturbing pattern. Every questionable financial transfer, every forged authorization, and every missing approval pointed toward the same small group of executives. Shortly after midnight, Logan returned from several phone calls carrying news that immediately changed the atmosphere inside the garage. I've spoken with a contact at the FBI field office. Everyone looked up. They already have an open securities inquiry involving Adrian Voss. Giselle stared at him. They're investigating him? Not officially enough to act, Logan replied. They've been waiting for someone who can connect the financial activity to physical evidence. Until now, they only had fragments. For the first time since arriving at the shop, Giselle felt genuine hope. The conspiracy surrounding her company wasn't invisible anymore. Someone else had already noticed pieces of it. Before anyone could discuss their next move, Charlotte's phone vibrated across the workbench. She glanced at the screen. 3 missed calls, all from the company's IT department. Charlotte frowned. That's strange. Mason immediately looked up. Let me see. He examined the phone for less than a minute before his expression changed. This isn't about missed calls. He opened the device settings and located an enterprise management application still running in the background. They're tracking you. Charlotte's face turned pale. I stopped using my company phone weeks ago. You stopped using it, Mason said calmly. But you never removed the corporate management software. He checked the activity logs. The application had transmitted location data several times during the night. Silence filled the garage. Giselle immediately understood what that meant. If they know Charlotte is here, they'll know you're here too, Logan finished. No one panicked. Panic wasted time. Instead, Mason quietly gathered every report, every photograph, and every signed statement into separate evidence folders. If they're coming, he said, everything important leaves before they arrive. Less than 3 hours later, at exactly 8:47 that morning, a dark luxury sedan rolled slowly into the parking lot. 3 people stepped out. Leading them was Xavier Holt, Hartman Automotive Group's general counsel. Tall, perfectly dressed, and carrying himself with effortless confidence, Xavier entered the garage as though he owned every building he walked into. Behind him stood 2 broad-shouldered men who said nothing. Xavier smiled politely at Giselle. The board requires your immediate presence. His voice remained calm. This is an internal company matter. Before Giselle could answer, Mason calmly set down the wrench in his hand and walked toward the center of the garage. No, he said evenly. It stopped being an internal matter the moment someone sabotaged that brake system. Xavier finally turned his attention toward him. And you are? Mason Cole. I understand you've inspected the vehicle. I completed a federally compliant forensic examination. Without raising his voice, Mason continued. The report has already been transmitted to the FBI field office in Denver. Additional copies have been secured through independent channels. Every photograph, measurement, and technical finding has been documented under verified chain of custody procedures. For the first time, Xavier's confident expression weakened. He realized something had gone terribly wrong. The evidence was no longer sitting inside one small repair shop. It already existed in multiple places beyond anyone's reach. The garage fell silent. After several long seconds, Xavier adjusted his glasses, looked once at Giselle, then slowly turned toward the exit. Without another word, he and the 2 men walked back to their car and drove away. Watching the sedan disappear down the county road, Logan quietly broke the silence. They've just realized they can't bury this anymore. Mason looked back at the Bentley, resting quietly on the lift. No, he replied. Now they'll try to survive it. 48 hours later, the emergency meeting of Hartman Automotive Group's board of directors began on the 32nd floor of the company's headquarters. Adrian Voss had moved quickly, using carefully prepared financial reports and forged transfer documents. He convinced enough board members to accelerate the vote of no confidence against Giselle Hartman. By the time the meeting opened, he believed the outcome had already been decided. One by one, the directors entered the conference room. Adrian took his usual seat at the far end of the table, calm and confident. Beside him sat Xavier Holt, the company's general counsel. Neither man looked concerned. Giselle entered alone. She carried nothing except a slim laptop. Outside the conference room, Charlotte waited quietly, while Logan Burke remained in the lobby, staying in contact with the FBI field office every few minutes. The meeting began with routine formalities before Adrian stood to address the board. Speaking with measured confidence, he presented what appeared to be overwhelming evidence. A contract transferring nearly $40 million in company assets. Several financial summaries showing suspicious transactions. Documents carrying Giselle's electronic signature. He carefully described a pattern of executive misconduct and concluded that the company could no longer trust its own chief executive officer. Several board members nodded. Others quietly studied the papers in front of them. When Adrian finished, he turned politely toward Giselle. The floor is yours." She stood without showing any emotion. "I only have 3 items to present." She connected her laptop to the conference screen. "The first concerns my vehicle." A detailed forensic report appeared. Photographs clearly showed the deliberately scored brake line, accompanied by measurements, technical analysis, and a documented chain of custody. The report explained that the damage could only have been created intentionally and had been designed to cause complete brake failure at highway speed. Giselle displayed the official filing confirmation. "The report has already been submitted to the FBI." A quiet murmur spread through the room. Adrian's expression barely changed, but his confidence began to fade. "The second item," Giselle continued, "concerns internal communications." She displayed several authenticated emails exchanged between Adrian Voss and Xavier Holt. Unlike printed copies that could be questioned, these messages contained original server metadata, verified login records, timestamps, and IP addresses. Together, they outlined what both executives had repeatedly called the leadership transition. No one spoke. The director silently read every line on the screen. The carefully constructed story Adrian had presented only minutes earlier was beginning to collapse. Giselle advanced to the final slide. "This morning," she said, "the Securities and Exchange Commission acknowledged receipt of a formal complaint regarding securities fraud, concealed financial transfers, and an attempted corporate takeover involving Hartman Automotive Group." A case number appeared beneath the filing confirmation. The room became completely silent. Adrian slowly stood. Remaining remarkably composed, he argued that the forensic report had been prepared by a private consultant, that the emails had been taken out of context, and that the SEC complaint represented nothing more than an attempt to damage his reputation. His voice never rose. His confidence never appeared to crack. Then the conference room door opened. Every head turned. Logan Burke entered, followed by an FBI special agent carrying a federal subpoena. The agent walked directly toward Xavier Holt. "Mr. Holt," she said calmly, "you are required to accompany us as a material witness in an ongoing federal investigation involving securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy." No one moved. Xavier looked once toward Adrian. Adrian said nothing. Without protest, Xavier gathered his briefcase and quietly left the conference room with the agent. The silence that followed felt endless. For the first time in years, Adrian Voss found himself standing alone. He slowly looked around the table. The board members who had supported him minutes earlier now avoided his eyes. The evidence had become impossible to ignore. The chairman called for the vote. One by one, each director announced a decision. Only 4 voted against Giselle. 7 voted to retain her as chief executive officer. The motion failed. Adrian's attempt to seize control of the company had collapsed. As the meeting adjourned, he remained standing beside his chair, staring quietly across the room at Giselle. After a long silence, he asked only one question. "Where did you find him?" Giselle closed her laptop. She glanced briefly toward the conference room window, where the Denver skyline stretched beneath the afternoon sun. Then she answered with a calm smile. "I didn't find him. He found the truth." And in that single moment, everyone in the room understood that the mechanic they had never heard of had done what an entire board of executives, lawyers, and financial experts had failed to do. He had uncovered the one piece of evidence that no conspiracy could survive. In the days that followed, the truth spread faster than anyone inside Hartman Automotive Group had expected. Federal investigators formally charged Adrian Voss and Xavier Holt with multiple counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, and attempting to cause bodily harm. Investigators also expanded their inquiry into an international investment network suspected of financing the attempted takeover of the company. What had begun as one damaged brake line was now exposing a conspiracy far larger than anyone had imagined. Inside Hartman Automotive Group, the board appointed an independent audit committee to review every major financial transaction from the previous 2 years. Employees who had quietly feared speaking up finally came forward, helping investigators uncover additional evidence hidden within routine corporate records. Charlotte Reed received a formal apology from the board and returned to her position, with her reputation fully restored. Logan Burke closed another successful investigation. But before leaving Denver, he shared one final discovery with Mason. The investment fund behind this case, Logan said, appears in several files from the federal investigation you were forced to abandon 4 years ago. Mason wasn't surprised. Some stories simply waited for the right moment to continue. A week later, the familiar black Bentley Continental GT rolled quietly back into Cole's auto. This time, there was no hidden danger, only unfinished business. Giselle stepped into the garage, carrying 2 envelopes. The first contained payment for the repair, the forensic investigation, and every hour Mason had devoted to saving her life. The second held something far more important. It was an offer to become Hartman Automotive Group's independent safety consultant, reporting directly to the CEO while remaining completely independent from corporate management. Giselle knew exactly why she had chosen him. Large consulting firms answered to executives. Mason answered only to the truth. He looked at the letter for a long moment before folding it closed. "Let me think about it," he said. Giselle smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." As the Bentley disappeared down the quiet county road once again, Mason's phone rang. It was Logan. "The FBI wants to reopen your old case." Mason glanced toward the weathered NTSB credential standing upright on the workbench, no longer hidden away. For the first time in 4 years, the past was no longer chasing him. It was inviting him back. And somewhere beyond Denver, another conspiracy was already waiting to be uncovered. If you enjoyed this emotional mystery filled with corporate drama, hidden conspiracies, and powerful life lessons while improving your English listening skills, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you had discovered the sabotaged Bentley? And stay with us for our next unforgettable story, where one ordinary person will once again uncover an extraordinary truth that no one else can see.